Good evening, and welcome to our discussion on coping with pressure. In case we haven't met before, my name is Daniel, and I'll be leading our time together this evening. Tonight, we are joined by Shaq, Ruth, and Sophia, who are all members of Christ Church Banstead. So I'll be interviewing them tonight, asking them about the experiences they've had with pressure over the last year or so because of COVID, and we'll be asking them how they coped with that pressure. We'll also be thinking about how Jesus himself faced pressure, and we'll do that by looking at one of the Gospels, an eyewitness account of Jesus' life. We'll look at how he faced pressure and how he himself handled that pressure. Shaq, Ruth, Sophia, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Rob.
No problem.
Ruth, it's really funny because you're upside down, but I'm sure it's providing some comic relief for those at home. While you, Ruth, while you try to figure that out, why don't Sophia and Shaq, why don't you tell us briefly about who you are? So some of us will know who you are because you're members of Christ Church. But for those who maybe don't come to our church and are tuning in, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? Sophia, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I'm Sophia. I'm a doctor and I work in a hospital in London. And normally I specialise in skin diseases and skin cancer. I'm married to Tom, and we have two young children, Henry, who's 2 years old, and Amelia, who is nearly 5.
Excellent. Thanks, Sophia. Shaq, how about you?
Hey guys, I'm Shaq. I work for a travel sales company. We specialise in long-haul international travel, so we do flights, car hire, accommodation, tours, you name it, we do it. And we also service quite a large corporate travel market as well. I hold a management position at the company and lead a sales team of about 18 people. I'm married to Lorraine and we have 3 children, ages ranging from 22 to 3, which is lots of fun.
Excellent, Shaq. Shaq, I'm really curious. With Boris's roadmap and everything, do you have more work now or less? Because I imagine everyone's probably starting to book holidays now, but also you're probably not dealing with as many cancellations or refund requests as you were maybe a few weeks or months ago.
That's a great summary, Dan. Yeah, pretty much how it is. People are starting to book for the end of the year. There's not as much confidence in the summer, but that will come. But there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel. Us in the aviation industry and travel are certainly full of a bit more confidence than we were. It's been good. It's been a long year, but it's been good.
Excellent. Thanks, Shaq. Ruth, great to see you're not upside down anymore.
Yeah.
Well done for figuring that out.
I've just had 10 messages telling me I'm not upside down. So that's Daniel.
Great. Everyone wants to encourage you. Ruth, why don't you tell us briefly about who you are as well and what you do?
So I'm Ruth. I'm a head of maths at a private girls' independent school. It's a day and boarding school in the lovely Surrey Hills. So it's a secondary school, 11 to 18. I'm married to Andrew, and we've got 2 primary aged boys who are 11 and 6. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. The first question I'd like to ask you all is just about your experience with pressure over the past year or so, especially since the first lockdown. What has life been like? How have you faced pressure? Ruth, I've actually got a related question to this. Since you're a teacher, I'm curious as to what's the vibe like at school? Are kids happy to be back because they can see their friends, or are they gutted because they're not at home playing on their PlayStation?
Yeah, it's a real mixture, actually. I thought everyone would be really just so happy to be back. And some of them are, and it's good. They all recognise it's good to be around people, real people. But there's quite a few that are upset that they can't go to school in their pyjamas and that they have to actually get out of bed before 8 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah, there's a mixture of feelings, I'd say. But as staff, we're really pleased to be back. all of us have not enjoyed online teaching. So it's good to be back in person, definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. That actually segues nicely onto the question I wanted to ask. Tell us a bit about how life has been over the past year or so since the first lockdown. In what ways have you faced pressure personally?
Quite a few different ways. I think teaching has been an interesting career over the last year, very different to the one I certainly signed up for over 20 years ago. I think there's been a few specific pressures, though, that have made it really hard. I think the first of those is probably this kind of steep learning curve that we've had to go through with going from the classroom to teaching online. When I first started teaching, I used chalk on a board, and now Easter holidays, suddenly we had to learn all these new programs and try to think through how do we translate what we do in the classroom live to something meaningful and interactive, and still convey everything we need to online. And that has been a huge, quick, steep learning curve of learning new programs and technologies. So that's been tricky. Definitely, that's been a big challenge. I think the constant change has been tricky. I know that has for a lot of people. But we regularly seem to get updates on whether we'll be back in school or whether the kids will be back. Even like once I was in the hairdressers and I heard on the radio, oh, it's going to be a staggered start. You know, we hear just secondhand, and that's quite hard to plan for. I think I've rewritten my schemes of work about 5 times now over the last year. So that constant change is tricky to manage. And actually, I think one of the most difficult things for me at work was when we were told that exams were cancelled, A-level and GCSEs. You know, usually when a girl or a student progresses, particularly to university, is dependent on their grades at A-level. And that's usually down to them and how well they've studied, how well they've prepared for their exams. But then all of a sudden it became this huge personal thing where it was no longer how much preparation they'd done, but it was about what I thought they could get. And that was very difficult because I know these kids and I care about them and I know what grades they need to progress to university. So it was really difficult to award what I thought was fair and right, and know whether that might enable them to go to their university of choice or not. Suddenly it became incredibly personal with these kids that I care about. So I think that's been one of the hardest things at work. I also manage a team. I'm a head of a large department. Maths is a core subject, so it's large. And of course, all the staff have been anxious about different things. We've had absences. People have faced different pressures at home. So managing a team in that situation isn't always the easiest thing. And then I think finally at home has been a different pressure for me. Obviously, I've been teaching online for the whole year. And then, of course, I've got 2 primary age boys, one of whom's got special needs. So he has different needs that we need to cater for. So managing the homeschooling and the teaching online full time, and then just being a mum and looking after them, it has been so tricky. So yeah, those are probably the biggest ones for me.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, I mean, spinning all those plates at the same time. What would you say has been the hardest part over the past year?
I think that final one actually is, I love my job, even when it's crazy. But managing and juggling all those different responsibilities and still caring for my children and the homeschooling, it's just at times been overwhelming, really.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Shaq, how about you? How have you faced pressure over the past year or so because of COVID?
It's been a changing experience, really, month to month. I mean, obviously, as the whole world knows, you haven't seen many planes in the sky for a while. We're a travel sales company. So, I mean, the first 2 to 3 months was a little bit like what Ruth was saying, getting used to an ever-changing dynamic. So from working in a large sales team of 20 25 people in a room, suddenly you're in a room by yourself, working remotely, whilst having to deal with extremely worried clients and stressed out clients about obviously refunds, having to work out changing regulations of what package laws are when it comes to travel, new ways. I mean, our job is heavy on sales and lots of fun, going to then going very heavy on administration, whilst working with less staff. I mean, travel industry and many industries around the world have been hit quite hard, and obviously we're thankful for the furlough scheme, which has meant that we've had to scale down our team, but of course in many ways the workload was heavier. So for me, that meant a problem for our industry. When you're working remotely from home, it tends to be a 7-day-a-week job. It's very difficult to switch off. I'd never had that problem before. Since COVID, it's been the opposite, 60-hour week, give or take. But of course, in my management role, I'm still having to try and manage the staff. Doing that remotely is very difficult, as Ruth was just saying. And also, I mean, I'm a big believer that in people, and it's, I think a big part of my role is trying to support where I can and helping them, not just helping them with their workload and the changing dynamic of our job, but being there for them to listen to their own worries and fears and anxieties. And it's no secret that furloughs helped many industries, but of course there are still redundancies. So that's been, I'm very grateful, thankful. We work for a fantastic company that have looked after everyone incredibly. It really is amazing. But yeah, so that's been stressful. Alongside, obviously, having a 2-year-old who couldn't go to preschool and a teenager who couldn't go to school. My wife did a fantastic job. I'm very grateful. I tried to help where I could. So yeah, switching off at times was difficult. But yeah, but since September, things have been different. Travel has restarted to a point. But then, of course, you then get the other set of problems of which places are open, which do you need a PCR test before you travel? Can you get in with a visa? And then suddenly there's a local lockdown in the country you're traveling, or there's a local lockdown in the country you're leaving from, and just as you think you're getting somewhere, suddenly all that work is undone and crashing you back down to doing refunds again. So yeah, that's been difficult, and managing people's expectations, and suddenly you're back to home working again. We did go back to the office. We are still in the offices now, which is great, only on small numbers. But yeah, up and down.
Thanks, Jack. And what would you say has been the hardest part for you? I mean, you mentioned that it's been hard for you to switch off. What has been the hardest part for you, would you say, over the past year?
I suppose, like all of us, I'm a creature of comfort. No one likes their comfort being taken away from them, and not knowing what's happening next and what's today going to be like, what you're going to face. And yeah, like I said earlier, I like to think I care, and you're hearing some, not just from clients, but from staff, from friends, from colleagues, the things that people are going through. It's really hard, really, really difficult. And yeah, just trying to manage all these things and trying to do the right things. It's difficult, and stay patient. So it's very difficult.
Thanks, Jack. Sophia, how about you? Gosh, what has the past year been like for you working in a hospital? In what ways have you faced pressure over the past year or so?
Yeah, well, actually, there's a lot of overlap with what both Ruth and Shaq have said. So one of the major problems has been, we've basically been dealing with this problem of COVID, which essentially is an unaccessible risk, or it certainly was at the start. And a large part of medicine and decision-making in medicine is trying to weigh up the risks and the benefits. And essentially, that has been impossible at the start, and we had no guidelines. So we were making quite important decisions about managing patients and interacting with colleagues, and the risk to ourselves as individuals, and the risk that I posed to my family when I went home. And none of that really we had any sort of firm answers about. And that went on for really quite a long time. And then when the guidelines did come out, as everyone's been talking about for every part of life, but in hospital, it would change within 24 hours, within 12 hours, it would change. We turn up at work and there'd be a new wall to follow a guideline. and different parts of the hospital would have needs. Obviously, we all know that sort of ITUs and the beds issues have been going on. And I'd turn up and I'd be wondering where I'd be needed, where I'd need to be going, whether I'd be needing to change my pattern of working completely overnight. It was certainly quite concerning on one day when we turned up, and the area of the hospital that had the biggest need was the morgue. And so obviously facing death on a daily basis was quite challenging too. And then on a more personal note, basically overnight, we had to decide around sort of, well, it must have been early March time, that I could no longer interact at all with my parents, who are usually a very big part of our life and very key in looking after our children as well when we normally go to work. And we could no longer see them because I posed too much of a threat. I was seeing COVID patients every day. So just the rapid changes and the persistence of it as well, that's what I found really, really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sophia. And what would you say has been the hardest bit for you over the past year?
So I think probably similarly to Ruth, actually, it's the juggling. So trying to be professional at work and help in an awful situation where everybody is exhausted and still being safe and protecting my family and being a mother. All of that it's just quite hard to put together, and I found that really difficult.
Thanks, Sophia. The next question I'd like us to discuss is I'd like you to explain how you coped with the pressure. How did you handle it? Shaq, why don't we start with you? How did you cope with the pressure? Shaq, I can't actually hear you.
Sorry, that's because I muted myself because I was coughing. Apologies. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
One way of coping, I mean, for many years I've liked my exercise, but I found that a key thing, being able to get away each day to go for a run or a cycle, just to collect thoughts and what have you, and help to de-stress. I did that a lot, and I do think I'm quite a people person, and I'm quite open as well. I'm not shy in sharing how I feel. Sometimes that might be to my detriment, I don't know. But so, I mean, I was meeting up with lots of people, obviously within guidelines, of course, to go for a walk or even just a phone call, and just to share burdens and to share what's going on in life. I think that's really key for all of us, really, is that it's the old saying, a problem shared, isn't it? You know, is a problem halved. And you try to keep things as normal as possible. So, yeah, I was still serving in church where possible, for example, and making sure that I was making myself available, because I think trying to keep life as normal as possible and getting to the office when I could, once it was allowed, and being able to see people, because that was one thing that I really struggled with. I mean, I've done this role for the same company for 24 years, and to be in a room with 24 people 5 days a week. I mean, one of the things I always say in my management role is that we spend more time with our colleagues than we do with our families sometimes. So, that's why it's really important to have a team ethic and a team spirit. And but I really miss these people. And halfway through, I was actually asked to lead a new team with more responsibility, and that was great. It's challenging, but a lot of responsibility. But needing to get to know 18 new people and to get to know them and to build bridges alongside trying to keep in contact with my old team. It was I did find that hard, I must say. But I'm very grateful for the support that I've had from the company and from colleagues and from friends, and yeah, like I say, just sharing those things, and of course, giving these things to God in prayer, and also to extremely grateful for my family. They've shown me a lot of grace. I can be a bit of a stress head, but it's been interesting this year, actually, I must say. So I think maybe I've chilled out a bit, but that's probably not for me to say.
Thanks, Shaq. Sophia, how about you? How have you coped with the pressure over the past year or so?
So I definitely echo what Shaq says, that speaking with others going through similar things has been incredibly helpful. I was really blessed in the department that I had. There was one other doctor and two other nurses who actually I met to pray with. And with the consultant, we decided that we would also read through the Bible in 1 year. And that was really, really helpful and very supportive during quite a tricky time. And then on a more practical note, initially, as a thought for sort of a homeschooling situation, we started a vegetable patch, and I've never grown anything in my whole life. So that was really fun, and now I definitely enjoy it more than the children do. But it's been really good.
What have you grown?
Oh, all kinds of things. The weirdest thing we grew was a kohlrabi, which basically looks like an alien as it grows out of the ground. I recommend it.
Does it taste good?
No, actually, it really doesn't taste very good, but it's very entertaining.
Just know how it looks.
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks, Sophia. Ruth, how about you? How have you coped with what have you done to cope with the pressure over the past year or so?
Yeah, I suppose one thing I've noticed is that not all pressure is bad for a start. Actually, I've noticed that there have been some benefits from the pressure. In terms of learning new skills, I would not choose to learn how to use Teams and how to use my new tablet and how to use all these different things had it not been for COVID. So actually, I would still be using my chalk if I had my choice. But no, I think actually that's been good for me. It's forced me to learn new skills. So I've kind of been grateful for that pressure in a way. I think one thing I've learned over many years of pressure actually is about knowing my limits of what I can take as well, and recognizing when I get to the point of feeling busy compared to feeling overwhelmed, and knowing where that kind of trigger is, and then speaking to my manager. So I just contacted my senior management at school when I got to a point of I cannot take this anymore, and they were helpful to a degree, and yeah, so that helped, knowing where the cutoff has to be. And the other thing, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but actually my husband is my help as well. I'm very grateful for him. We have a really good partnership. He's brilliant and helps with the kids, does the drop-offs, and helps with the cooking and all those kind of things. And I couldn't do it on my own, but I'm very grateful to have him to help me. And actually, probably the most useful thing is praying with him. At those moments where you suddenly feel a little bit overwhelmed, praying with somebody else, it's not magic formula. The problems don't disappear. But it does help to reset my focus and my perspective and put it back on God. And in the midst of pressure, it just helps me to reset. So I've been grateful for those moments where we've chosen to pray together. That has really helped.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ruth. That actually sets us up nicely for the next question I wanted to ask, which is what difference has your faith made? What difference has your faith made as you've faced pressure over the past year or so? Sophia, why don't you kick us off?
Sorry, just unmuting. Yeah, I mean, it's made all the difference in the world, really, for me. Essentially, I felt like I've been in a massive storm. I'm sure we all feel very similar to that. And having the hope in Jesus has been an unshakable anchor, and certainly a passage that I found very helpful. It's from Isaiah 40, 28 to 29, which I'm going to read if that's okay. It goes, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." And certainly over this time, I've sort of dwelled on that amongst other verses, and I found that that's been really helpful through some pretty tough times.
Thanks, Sophia. Shaq, how about you? What difference has your faith made?
There are so many things that I could say, but obviously we haven't got long. I think dealing with the pressure and what I found was that obviously with the stress of the situation, not just for me, but for everyone, particularly the workplace that I knew, it brings out in youth, things that wouldn't normally happen, and that stress and anxieties can cause lots of problems, and dealing with those things with lots of kindness and love and grace. And I know that my faith has made a big difference in that, because I know that I don't deserve grace and love and kindness sometimes, well, a lot of the time, and so that's really helped me to know that I've felt that divine grace from Jesus, and I want to try and mirror that in the way that I act. I know I fail a lot of the time, but that's definitely helped. And I think the biggest testimony I could talk about trusting God's sovereignty, and that He's in charge of everything, and as Christians we know that. I think the biggest thing that I've learned through this is that I'd say sometimes my glass was half empty, really. I would say I'm a realist. My wife would say I can be a bit negative, and I think she's probably right in some respects. I don't tend to be negative at work, but I can be a bit negative. And I thought I'd be very anxious, thinking that, oh my goodness, my career, my livelihood could be taken away, and it's been amazing. God's given me such peace over this that I just haven't been anxious, haven't been really that stressed. Yes, I have been stressed, and there have been moments, of course there has. And I think that comes from, we had a very helpful sermon series at the beginning of the year. It was really inspired timing in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it talked about living wisely in this world, and that I think, I could talk for hours. I've listened to it so many times, but it's just so helpful for me. And for me, it's reminded me that life in the world is hard, and that's true whether you're a Christian or not. Life's full of trials and hardships and sufferings, pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. And the writer of Ecclesiastes, it's like a wisdom book, and it talks a lot about how life is a gift from God, and to appreciate it for what it is, and to enjoy it, whether we've got a little or a lot. And I really realise it's only in trusting in God's gift to us in Jesus that we actually can have the ability to maybe see life in that way. And it's helped me to realise that striving for maybe certain things in life that are temporary is not always the way to go. And it's helped me just to enjoy, in fact, what Ruth was saying earlier about that actually the pressure is not, yes, it's been difficult, but at the same time it's been a challenge, and it's been good, and it's helped me to really appreciate what I've got, and that God supplies our every needs. He tells us that we don't need to be anxious, and to trust Him and seek His kingdom, and that's what I've tried to do. Again, I know I failed in many ways, but I do. But God's really helped me through that, and God's greatest gift to us is Jesus, and that's what's kept me going through this time.
Thanks, Shaq. Ruth, how about you? What difference has your faith made over the past year or so?
I think a huge difference. I think, I mentioned praying with Andrew, and I think prayer really helps because it reminds us, doesn't it, that we're not on our own, that there is someone else there who loves us and cares for us. When I was a kid, my mum used to sing loads of songs, but one of the ones she used to sing was this traditional, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in His wonderful face, and the things of the earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. And that has always resonated with me. Not that the things of the earth disappear, because they don't, but that they grow dimmer when I'm faced with Jesus. When I look to Him, my beautiful Saviour, who gave everything for me, my troubles do grow dimmer, and that helps to put things into perspective. I think, and as part of that as well, that realization that someone else is in control. Shaq mentioned this. All of this is not dependent on me. I don't have to take the responsibility and the burden for everyone around me on myself. I don't have to bear that. I can give it to Jesus. We interestingly had a psychologist from America in to talk to the students a few weeks, I think, before Christmas on stress and well-being. And it was really interesting. He's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God at all. But he said that one factor that seemed to present in people that were able to cope with stress and pressure was people of faith. And he said he didn't understand why particularly, but he guessed that perhaps it was an idea that it didn't all rest on us and that there was something else out there. And that does resonate with me, that I have a God who is in control, and he takes the burden from me. I don't have to bear it. So obviously that's hugely important when you're dealing with pressure. I don't have to take that burden. And I think finally that when we pray, it resets our perspective. This life is temporal. Shaq just talked about that. So Sophia experiences that every day at work in the hospital. Life is fleeting. And so when I set my sights on eternity, it gives me something wonderful to hope for. This life is not it. I have an eternity with my Saviour to look forward to and to celebrate, even in the midst of troubles here. I'm just going to share a passage that a colleague at work actually shared with me. And it's from John 14, it's verses 1-4. Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." And I have that wonderful hope that I know where I'm headed. And as difficult as this life can be at times, I have a sure hope in Jesus.
Fantastic, Ruth. Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, Ruth, Shaq, Sophia. It's been so good to hear your stories. Thank you for taking the time out and for being willing to share so openly with us. Thank you, and hey, I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Friends, we've just heard from Sophia, Shaq, and Ruth as to how they've each faced pressure and done their best to cope with it. What about you? How do you cope with pressure? I think my answer to that question would be nowhere near as well as I'd like to. Indeed, I've often buckled under pressure. And I'm sure you can probably think of times when you have too. What do you think might be the most intense pressure anyone has ever faced? All of us know to one degree or another what it means to face pressure. But what is the severest pressure anyone has ever known? I believe it's the pressure we see Jesus face in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before he was arrested to be crucified. It's recorded for us in the Gospels, which are eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. One of those was written by Matthew, Jesus' friend. And I want us to think about a snippet of Matthew's Gospel to see how Jesus himself faced pressure and how he handled pressure. Not yet, Andrew. We'll come to the verse in just a moment. In order to do that, in order to think about how Jesus faced pressure and how he handled it, Matthew will answer 3 questions for us. The first is, what is the extent of Jesus' pressure? What is the extent of Jesus' pressure? Andrew, if we could please have that verse up, thank you. So have a look at me at what it says in Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 to 38. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." To what extent does Jesus face pressure here? He says that he feels overwhelmed by an unbearable amount of sorrow. He describes it as sorrow to the point of death. In other words, he's saying that the inner turmoil he's feeling is so excruciating that it could almost kill him. By the way, it's an emotional or spiritual anguish that he's experiencing here. He says, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow." So that's the extent of Jesus' pressure and distress. It's so intense that he feels as though he could almost die from it. But why is it so extreme? When we see the cause of Jesus' pressure, we'll understand why. The second question Matthew answers is, what is the cause of Jesus' pressure? Let's read verse 39. Going a little farther, Jesus fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Did you notice what Jesus prayed to God, his Father, to be taken away from him? It was a cup. It's a bit odd. Why is he praying for a cup to be removed? Although the cup reference is often lost on us today, it symbolized a very important idea in the Old Testament, which was, of course, the Bible of Jesus and his contemporaries. Listen to how the Old Testament describes this cup in the book of Jeremiah, for example. So God says, "Take from my hand this cup filled with the wine of my wrath, and make all the nations to whom I send you drink it." Did you notice, as we read, what the cup is filled with? God's wrath. And did you notice who it's for? The nations. Now, as a brief side note, I know we don't often like to think about God's wrath. We much prefer to think about his love. But actually, a loving God without wrath would not be much of a loving God at all. If God were indifferent to evil and injustice, then he wouldn't be loving. In order to be loving, he must loathe those things. He must abhor things like murder, abuse, and betrayal. God's wrath is a reality because he is a loving God who hates evil and injustice. And because he hates evil, he will judge it. Indeed, he promises to do so. Now, back to the question, who is the cup of wrath for? So in the Old Testament quote I just read, we saw that it was for the nations. And in the context, the nations represent those who have committed evil against God and his people. And before we think, oh, that's not me, we need to bear in mind that the rest of the Bible makes it very clear that everyone is guilty of evil. Everyone, that is, apart from Jesus. We learn that he is the only person who never sinned, who never committed any evil against God or against other people. Yet, who is set to drink from the cup of wrath, according to the lines we read from Matthew's Gospel? It's Jesus, the sinless one, God's own Son. The one who never sinned is the one who is about to self-sacrificially drink from the cup of wrath. That is, who is about to suffer judgment for all the forms of corruption our world has ever known. Do we see here the cause of Jesus' distress, the cause of his pressure? He is about to bear the punishment for all the evil and sin our world is capable of. So how does he respond? We've seen the extent of Jesus' pressure and the cause of his pressure. Now we turn to our third and final question. How does Jesus respond to the pressure? Let's read Matthew 26, verse 42. Jesus went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." How does Jesus respond? By asking God that his will be done. The pressure Jesus is facing is so high that he is tempted to tap out. But even greater than his temptation to abort his mission is his desire to submit to his Father's divine will and thus fulfill what he was sent to do. Friends, we mustn't confuse this for resignation. Jesus could very easily have avoided drinking from the cup of wrath. Later on in the story, Roman soldiers come to arrest him. And when they do that, one of his disciples takes out a sword to fight them. But listen to what Jesus says to him in verse 52. "Put your sword back in its place. Do you think I cannot call my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" Jesus wasn't just passively resigned, was he? He could very easily have thwarted the plot to arrest and kill him. Indeed, he had many opportunities to do so, and could have done it in more ways than one. But he chose not to. And he chose not to because he wanted to carry out his Father's will, as revealed in the scriptures, to mercifully and lovingly save sinful people. Now, what does this all mean for us? Because Jesus didn't buckle under pressure, but drank from the cup of wrath when he would later die on the cross, we won't have to drink from the cup of wrath if we trust in Jesus. That is, we won't have to be condemned for all the sin, evil, and wrongdoing that we've committed against God and against other people, because Jesus was condemned in the place of sinners like you and me. So my question to you this evening is, how will you respond to what Jesus has done? Will you trust him and in thanks seek to live a life that honors him for who he is? If you do, you'll receive the forgiveness he offers you by having paid the penalty for all your wrongdoing when he drank from the cup of wrath by dying on the cross. Or will you reject him and miss out on the forgiveness God offers through him and face the judgment yourself? There are only two responses to Jesus. We either trust him or reject him. There's no middle ground. There's no neutral territory. There's no sitting on the fence. So I wonder, which will you choose? By not choosing to trust and follow him, you are in fact choosing to reject him and his love. If you've been considering putting your trust in Jesus for some time, why not decide to do that tonight? Tell him that you're sorry for all your sin and that you want to live for him. Thank him for what he's done on the cross. And if you do that, please do let us know. We'd love to walk alongside you in your Christian journey. The Christian faith is meant to be shared with others. It's not meant to be a solo endeavor. If, however, you've never seriously considered following Jesus, we'd love to give you the opportunity to do that. to investigate him and his teachings further. One way you could do that is by signing up to our Exploring Jesus sessions. In these sessions, we'll look at one of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life in pairs or in small groups of 3 to really give you the opportunity to look into his claims and to ask any questions you might have. You can sign up by visiting our website. You can see the link there, christchurchbanstead.org/Christianity. If you visit that link, you can sign up to Exploring Jesus. By the way, you can come to as many or as few sessions as you'd like. So if you come to one and you don't like it, that's fine. There's no pressure to come back, although obviously we would love you to. Friends, that's all from us tonight. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us this evening. A huge thank you again to Shaq, Sophia, and Ruth. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. It was lovely to hear from each of you. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Take care, and I hope to see you soon.